that you had before on this computer, or is it a different setup?
I just downloaded like the bash terminal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
I'll invest in a MacBook soon.
What's that?
I said I'll invest in a Mac soon.
Someday. Yeah. They are expensive. Like, don't get me wrong. They're expensive things. They just make some things in development a little bit easier.
This is actually my roommate's computer.
Oh, really?
I'm not that into Disney. It's her computer. I'm just hoping when I get a dev job with my own computer.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll give you one.
Have to. But I know, like with Google, you can't do anything on their computer. It's like, let's say one day you started a business about shoes. If you ever Google shoes on their computer, they are going to claim ownership. Yeah,
depending on who you work for, that can be the case. They'll ask you to sign it's basically a non-compete, but saying that if you ever create any software that is related to the business of this business, then it becomes theirs. So, but you can declare things that you've been working on previously. You can also generally, so Google is hard because they're in everything, but you can generally, if you're working for somebody who's creating a game about stuffed animals, and you create a license plate reading app, they can't claim that. Like, it's just not.
My friend's always telling me, like, I have to make sure I don't use my Google computer.
Yeah.
As far as the project, is there a outline or instruction somewhere?
So in learn.co in week 4, the second section, there's a brochure project lab, I think it's called, and it tells you what you need. But it's basically, you need 3 images. You need to use Flexbox Floater Grid to do some things, and does anybody? I mean, I can pull it up.
Yeah, it's really open.
Yeah.
But they'll just tell you, like, you need to make sure you do these certain things, and you can do whatever you want.
Sam, can you bring mine up?
They call
it
flat.
It's your. I assume that your branch is V because of the issues we've had. What is it?
Apparently, someone who owns this has my name.
Yeah, very weird. Shoot, what did I name it?
Responsive.
Responsive. Yeah. Nice.
So I'm having an issue. Can you click on that video on the bottom? So I embedded that from YouTube, and I'm getting great. Because when I play it, I get unavailable. So
Weird.
Great.
Yeah, no, looks good.
Cool.
Can you open mine?
Are you playing it from your local computer? Yeah, so that's probably Google saying, I'm not going to allow you to do this because it feels like it's unsafe because you're trying to do it from your local computer and not from a website.
Okay.
So
how do I rectify that when I'm...
You can't. You just have to push it and test it when it gets up to GitLab. It should only take like 15. It should take less than a minute for it to show up on the.
Okay. Yeah, because when same video available.
Yeah, it's not. We've run into those issues recently too.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, so Charles, we just set up in a second, but we have a repo called Responsive that I may need to add you to. Oh, nice. And we're developing locally, and then we're pushing our code to that branch. And when you do, you automatically get, so you see here, it's responsive.flatiron-cc.com/Akara. That's like on the web, like on the internet.
So that is what I'm going to need to work on. I don't know why these gaps are there. I think
the gaps in between them?
No, I put those those marks.
Oh, like this?
Yes.
It's happening because this image happens to be small. So in your case, actually, it potentially makes a lot of sense to use a grid. Or maybe, are you even using a grid? Because grids could still do this. But yeah, so the issue is, even with grids, you need things to be proportionally sized to one another to remove any potential gaps. So what you could potentially do is, like, say that this thing is a half-sized image, and then as a result, the grid might pop this up. But what you're doing, you're trying to do a pretty complicated thing. That's why this is happening, which is good. It's just the other option is to just keep all of the images the same size and only do images that are of the same size, and then it would not push it
down on your computer
I
first.
wanted them to be different sizes.
Yeah, so if you want,
That would.
yeah, so if you want them to be different sizes, then you have to go use the grid.
What if I? Okay, well I can use the grid, but what if I added another column?
So it'll still happen. So like this, for example, in this column right here, see how this image is bigger than the other three that are in the same row? So it causes this guy to get pushed down and this guy to get pushed down, which causes then there to be extra space here.
Okay.
Even though, see how it's like going up in the spacing?
Okay, so I should use grid.
Yeah, so you have to use CSS grid if you want it, which is like flex, but what you can do with grid is you can say, I want this particular cell, this div, in your case the image, I want it to be proportional, so 1:1, but I want this one to be 1:3, which is to say I want it to act like it is a third bigger than the other things.
Okay.
So you use ratios to change the size of the,
And then would I need to change the ratios in all of them?
yeah. So the alternative to that is you can probably just use flex wrap. Like I don't know. Well, let me look at this CSS.
Can I see her HTML and CSS?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so you're doing a row. If you have wrap turned on, column, width, height. Whoop.
Yeah, we don't have 40 right. Yeah.
What's the which Git are we using again? Which
Get that.
So it's gitlab.com, and then I'll go make sure you're added to this project. Actually, I'll add you to the Flatiron group so you can look at other things too. What's your GitLab username?
should be okay. Yeah, CSMALL1.
Oh. All right, so then if you go to your groups, you should see a Flatiron DC, or you can search for Flatiron.
-DC.
Yep. If you click into there, you should see a bunch of projects, one of which is responsive.
Okay.
And if you click into there, you can, oh, this is a new computer. So we need to set you back up with SSH stuff. All right, yeah. So give me a minute when we break out in the group, when we break out to like start working on our projects. I'll come over and I'll help you get back set up.
Thank you.
All right, so I actually would have expected that it would have allowed it to fall. In your case, it might actually make the most sense to just do a float left, because then it won't try to do this height stuff. The other way to do it is you can tell No, it'll make it disproportional.
If I do a float left, can I center the entire grid on the page? So,
If you do a float left, you can still center the entire grid on the page. The other option is you could make them all have a min height of, let me see, that might work. So if we say min height 100%, oh, but it needs to be on the image. So, yeah, let me find like this one.
can I put it on the asterisk? Then it just apply to the whole page.
Yeah, that'll apply it to everything, which I don't know that you necessarily want to do that. Min height 100%. Ah. Okay. Oh, but it's because, so you have the width being 100% here. Try this. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, so another way to do this. No, it doesn't work.
Should I just resize the images with the gaps?
So you could do that. You could, for the ones that have the gap, you could just resize them to be whatever they need to be to make it work. So like you can make this one. It needs to be like 200 pixels. Oh, here. Right, like something like that. Like you can do that. You could do that. You just have to go find the right ones along the way. And that's fine from at the mobile breakpoint. It's going to drop down into a single row. Come on.
When it goes to the 2 column.
But when it goes to the 2 column, actually the 2 column, oh yeah, that should be fine. It's probably about the same height.
Yeah.
Come on.
I'll just put it.
Yeah, and then when it goes to 1 column, it should be fine as well. So yeah, I mean, it looks pretty good. It's just those little gaps, and this is just one of those hard things to do with CSS. Grid was made to do that type of thing. So if you want to go explore that, you can. It is relatively complicated, but you can do it.
Okay.
Yep. And you could also try to use just the float, which I think will just cause them all to just sit, because literally all you're doing on this page right now, you don't have any actual content outside of the top. Since you don't have anything underneath of it, the float might work really well for you because it'll just cause everything to sit next to each other until it hits the end of the page, and then it'll pull the next thing and then the next thing, and it might actually just keep them all sitting the way that you want them to.
So that would be.
So that would be like on the column. So remove the display flex from your row, and then for the column, make it float left.
So I've got another question that I could probably Google.
Yeah.
However,
So
so what I initially did.
makes me feel good at the end of
So what I initially did was here I had some backgrounds going, right? So I had. So I'm going to add a background CSS, which is, right, so header, right? Let's do biographies. Alright, so what I really want is I think that looks gaudy. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like that. Like I would like it to kind of fade out.
Yeah. You want it to like fade through some of the blue, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So you can, the easiest way to do that is go back to, instead of doing red,
Mm-hmm.
do RGBA. And so this is red, green, blue, and then translucence. So if you open up parentheses, parentheses, parentheses.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it has to touch RGBA.
Okay.
And then the first thing is how red you want it to be on a scale of 0 to 255. 255.
Okay.
And then how blue or how green and how blue. So you put a comma and you put it at 0, 0. Based on what you do.
Okay.
And then comma, the translucence is how much you want to let things fade through on a scale of 0 to 1. So
Okay.
if you do like 0.5,
Okay.
save that. Back. I don't think it's saved. I think it's on.
I didn't appreciate it.
Okay, so there you go. So that's letting it fade.
Right.
But then you want it to what? Fade from.
Like I don't want I want the red to be like here,
Okay.
right, and then just kind of like fade into blue on the side of that.
Yeah, so that is going to be creating a gradient,
Okay.
which Google is better than me at this. So.
So you want this left to right. So you want to do background image linear gradient to right, and then you want to do red, comma, the thing that we created, and then it'll fade from red to translucent.
So within the background colors?
No, you want to delete background color. Instead, you want to use background image linear dash gradient to right red, and then the RGBA.
That might not work. I don't know if I've ever tried to use red and RGBA together there, but we can make it work from there. So. All right, so I am going to do, yet again, a review of JavaScript. On Monday, we'll actually start in the course going through JavaScript. A lot of the concepts from that point forward will be familiar because we've gone over them over and over and over again, but that's good. So it should make a lot more sense once we get there and you start working on the labs and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to just start from the very beginning, which is, you can just follow along. I'm just going to put some examples up. What is a variable? Why do we? Variable is an alias used for substitution. So if I do something like color equals green, and then color equals color, and then green equals color, and then some variable equals green. What is, if I console log out some variable, what am I going to get? So, and if I change this to blue, what am I going to get when I console log out some variable? Why green?
Some variable.
So, but some variable equals another variable that's named green, which is why it doesn't have quotes around it.
Right.
So then you have to go up top and see what green is. Green is referencing some variable called color.
Right.
You have to go up. Color is referencing some variable called, so color is referencing some variable called color. Color is referencing some variable called blue. So if you substitute it all the way back down, some variable. Does that make sense? All right. So what is a function?
function is a way to group code together to make it reusable.
Yep, function is a way to group code together to make it reusable. So for example, if I wanted to create a string that says hello and then be able to, at any point in time, just put a name in and have it say hello to that person, we would do something like, so I could do, right, like I could say console.log hello Sam, and then hello John, and then hello Shaw, and then hello Shakara, and then hello Charles, right? I could do that, right, and that's okay. And in this very simple example, that's totally fine. But I could, instead of doing that, I could create a function called say hello, and we could pass into it, what's it called? What do we put inside of these parentheses sometimes? Parameter. Yeah, parameter and attribute, which in our case is going to be name. And then we could say console.log hello plus name. Alright? So then, instead of writing the console.log stuff, which maybe doesn't necessarily mean that much to us, we can say hello Sam. And if I run that code, what's going to happen in our console? I'll say hello Sam. So if I go open this up, we see hello Sam. But I can just as easily say hello John or hello anybody. Cool? Alright, so that's functions, that's variables. What are loops used for? And let's talk about for loops in particular, because I think that's the most straightforward concept.
They allow us to perform a string of code on each item in an array.
Yeah, they allow.
Sorry.
Yep. Nope, that's exactly right. The only piece there is it's not a string of code, it's just they allow us to perform a set of code or to execute a piece of code. But I know. Well, my spelling is probably wrong, or I was just getting tired. But it's not a string in that it's not. So strings are always things that are inside of quotes in JavaScript, and it's actually code. So for example, I could create an array of people. Sam, John, comma, Joe. Right, and then I could say, create a for loop that is person of people, and then I could say console.log hello person. What is that code going to do? It's going to print one of the names of the people? Yeah, so if we run this, we'll see all three of them get executed one at a time. So another way of proving the one at a time piece, right, because it just happens so quickly, it feels like they're all happening at once. If I create a variable called item, and I set item equal to hello plus person. If I console log out item, what are we going to see in our console?
Just an individual name, right?
Which individual?
Put on some Sam first.
Let's see. Why do you think it's Joe? Nope. Why is it the last one?
Because it's,
Yeah, so it's executing, so item is being set one of these array items at a time, right? So if we're looping over people, we're going to say, okay, well, the first person is Sam, so item equals hello plus Sam. So it's going to equal hello Sam. Okay, now let me go on to the next one, and that's John. So it's going to be item equals hello plus John. So it's going to be item is hello John. And then the third one is going to be hello Joe. Each time item is being overwritten, right? So by the third time it's hello Joe, and on the fourth time it's hello Kyle. So by the time I console.log out at the end, item is hello, whatever the last thing is. Does that make kind of sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
is that
gives
useful? Like, that's not good code, right?
No, that's not good code. Yeah, that's useless code. The only point in doing
No,
it
for sure.
is to demonstrate that this does it one at a time. It's not doing all of them at once.
Okay.
So wait, is item
Item means nothing. It's just a variable. I could call it blue sky.
okay? So but if you take a variable and set it equal to, then it's only going to show you the last one.
Yes, because, and the point here is that when we're looping over the for loop, it's executing this line of code, which is setting blue sky, one of the items in the array at a time.
Okay.
So it does Sam, and then and after it's done setting blue sky to hello Sam, it then, and only then, sets blue sky to hello John. And after it's done setting blue sky to hello John, it then, and only then, sets blue sky to Joe. And after it's done setting, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it ends up with, at the end, when we've looped over all the people, the last thing it happened to set it to was whatever the last thing in the array was. And because variables can be overwritten like this, in the end, blue sky is equal to hello Kyle, but it had been set to all of the previous ones at one point. Another way to potentially show this is I can put a debugger in here. What debugger does is it stops the code at a point of execution. So if I refresh the page, we're going to stop for the debugger for every time that line 6 gets called by our code. So if I refresh, see right now, blue sky is hello Sam, right? But if I go to the next step, so if you click this button, it says keep executing the code until you get back to debugger, okay? So I click it, and we're back to debugger, and it now says hello John. And then I click it again, and now it's hello Joe, and then I click it again, and now it's hello Kyle, and now when I do it, it's done.
Okay. So if you don't set a variable, then it prints them all.
No. So let me see. So console.log is the thing that does printing, right? Like it only prints when you call console.log. Like if I do this exact same thing again, it will not print anything, right? I'll stop at my debugger every time, but when I get to the end, you see we don't print anything, right? So I'm not console.logging anything. The point here is that the loop, when we're looping over people, it is executing this line of code one at a time over and over again. So it's executing it for Sam, and then for John, and then for Joe, and then for Kyle. But it doesn't do them all at once, right? It does them one at a time. And so when you're setting a variable inside of a loop, it's overriding the variable each time, so that by the time you finish the loop, it's just the last thing. Okay.
So I'm a very visual learner.
Yep.
Can you? So JavaScript is what is going to, if you click on a link within a page,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's gonna. You can set it so that it'll be highlighted.
Yep.
So it's been clicked, right?
Yep.
Can you? So I don't really. I have a nav bar on my page
Yep.
that I made.
Yep.
Can you show me how we would do that?
Yeah, I mean, that just happens by default in browsers with the links.
Okay.
So there's no need to do that.
Okay.
But we could do what we're going to start to do anyway, and we can start to do it today, is as a project we're going to create a to-do list. We're going to create a to-do list in the actual browser. So we can spend some time and do that right now, and that executes all of these different pieces, and it makes sense what JavaScript is actually doing. Before we get to that, though, I want to introduce a couple of new concepts. So there are two things that we should be aware of as we're moving forward with JavaScript. The first one is that JavaScript as a language makes a lot of functions available to you. So for example, I can do something like let's see. So I can create an array, right? So we have people. And again, I'll just put Sam and John here. And if I want to put another person onto that array, I can do something called push. So I can say people.push Sarah. So if I console log out people at this point, I have Sam, John, and Sarah. So basically, if you want to push an item onto an array, you can use push. If you want to remove an item from an array, you can use slice. You can also and then in addition to that, there are lots of functions like that. So you can go look at JavaScript if you're like, how do I whatever? Just go to Google, take a look. You should definitely be looking through the W3 Schools site on JavaScript. So if we go to JavaScript, they'll give you a whole bunch of these functions. So for example, these are functions literally, like string methods. So you can get the length of a string, for example, so in this case they're setting text as a variable to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the alphabet. If you call text.length, what you're going to get back is 26, right? You can, yep.
Why would you be using something like push instead of adding the name to the string?
Because in real life, so all of these things that we're doing, we're hard coding, and it's very small sets of code to make you aware of the concepts that exist. But in real life, you are getting information dynamically from the outside, which is what we're going to see when we get to the to-do list. So for example, if you've used to-do lists before, right? And so my initial array of items that I need to do is blank, right? So it's only when you click add a new item that I want to push something into that array so that my items are more than one.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So, and this is just, I'm introducing this incredibly quickly, and we're not going over all of these, but the point is there's a reference for this. There are lots of functions that are made available to you by JavaScript, the language itself. And so you go look at those and see what's available. We'll go over several of these as we're creating our functionality, but this is where these things are coming from. They're not magic, actually. All they are these functions that we've been creating on our own. The JavaScript library has created functions of their own that they make available to you, right? So they just wrote the same code that we're writing. They're just making it available to you to make things a little bit easier so you don't have to write it yourself. Okay. So that being said, JavaScript, and the reason why it became so important and useful on the web is that it can interact with the DOM, which is to say the document object model. The document object model, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is when you inspect, you see how there's a nesting that's happening here? This HTML that you've created is something that is parsable into essentially a hash that JavaScript can look through to be able to find an element and then manipulate it. So for example, here, I could do something like, well actually, let me just make it a little bit easier to get access to things. So I'm just going to put an ID of body onto body, and you can actually get it by body by tag name, but document.get element by ID body dot inner HTML did it not? Oh, hold on. There we go. I didn't reload the page, so we didn't have that. So I just changed the page because JavaScript makes available to us the document object model. It gives us access to everything that is HTML. And so what we're doing here is we're saying, starting at the document root, right? We have doc type HTML. I want you to then go look through the HTML and find an element that has an ID of body, which is this. And then I want you to set the inner HTML of that body element to be test.
Which is what?
Which is literally the word test, right? Because that's what's happening up there.
So inner HTML means content.
Yeah, it means content. So there's inner HTML and there's inner text. In our case, it would do the exact same thing. Okay. Inner HTML is useful for when you want to insert actual HTML. So I could do a bold tag, for example. And now it's actually bold. But if I do that as set the inner text, it's going to put the bold tags in. So that's the difference between those two.
So you're assigning it to the body, right?
Yep.
So if you wrote something within the body in HTML, would the JavaScript supersede, or would
It'll overwrite it.
Okay.
There are things, like there are other functions, not just inner HTML. We could get the element, and then we could append or prepend things to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we could put things on top of the content that already exists or underneath of the content that already exists. It's just another function that we have to use. Yeah. We can also add styles and remove styles dynamically this way. We can add classes and remove classes dynamically this way. We can create and remove elements dynamically this way. So it's just, this is how we're going to interact and use JavaScript to actually change what the page looks like. Just to get into that a little bit, we can start to talk about what it would look like to have a to-do list, and let's just start by creating a list. So we'll do UL and then we'll create a button. An ID of create task.
Is it automatically a video button?
This is going to be a button, like a like a submit button. So we can say create task. So we have this create task button, but when I click on it, it doesn't do anything, right? But we could say document.get element by ID. Whoops. So you can also find elements by lots of things, not just by their ID, but by their class name, by their tag name. Essentially the same selectors that we used for CSS. And it's auto-completing, but. So in our case, we want to get the create task button. And then we're going to say, we're going to add an event listener. We're going to listen for a click. And when it's clicked, we're going to call a function called add task. Okay, so we'll create that function called add task. This is one of those anonymous functions that we talked about last time that we're passing into the add event listener function provided to us by JavaScript. It's going to get called inside of the add event listener function, and it's going to pass us back an event that'll become useful later. But for right now, just know that when we click on the button, we're going to call the add task function. When we do this, we're just going to say document.get element. We can do it by tag name. It's the easiest right now. Say UL. We'll say, because this is the only thing we know about right now, inner HTML equals my first item. Okay, so now if we go back, out of that listener null, oh, it's that. So now when I click create task, oh, I missed it. Oh. Button, ID, UL, well, let's just call it. Yeah, let's make it a div, ID equals list. Oh, it's elements, I see. And there's our first item. Right, so when we click on the task, it puts the first item into the list, and that's the very beginning of a to-do list in real life. Now there's a whole lot more to a to-do list, right? Like we want to be able to change what the name of the item is, we want to be able to delete them, we want to be able to edit them, we want to do all of the things that CRUD allows us to do, and make sure that we're displaying all of them correctly, potentially reordering them so that they can be prioritized, etc. But that's the very beginning. That's what JavaScript starts to allow you to do. So the whole to-do list process of creating, deleting, updating list items is done through JavaScript. So that's a good functional example. Cool? Good.
I have a quick question though.
Yep.
It's like three functions ago, but
Yep.
you know we did person of people.
Yep.
I think that person part kind of threw me off. Can you tell me what,
Yep. So for example, gosh, what's going on? So let's just create a thing called cheeses. We're completely making all this up, right? Cheeses is just a thing that we're making up. We're going to say provolone, mozzarella, American, Parm. All right, so you can write for whatever of cheeses, and then whatever you put on the left-hand side. So cheeses is the name of the variable that we created, which is an array. Whatever we put on the left-hand side is the item one at a time that exists inside of that array.
So it's automatically the item.
It's automatically the item.
Okay.
And you can name it whatever you want. The reason why you name it is so that inside of these two brackets, you can get access to it. So I can say console.log, whatever we name the thing on the left. And it works.
Okay.
Because this is really just saying I want to set a variable that is going to be a reference to each of the items in the array as we loop through the array so that I can use it inside of my for loop.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's not like it's smart enough. Computers are relatively dumb. Like they really are. Like most of the time you can assume that there's no magic going on. It's not like it knows that because I named the one thing people that I need to name the item person. Right? There's nothing about the computer that would, in fact, that is an incredibly complex problem to be able to figure out. We happen to know it and it makes sense to us because we're humans and that's just how we work, right? But to the computer, it has no idea that a person is a singular of a people. And so it wouldn't even try to ever attempt, no programming language would ever try to attempt to do something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so the rest of class, we will work on our projects. We are going to go through the Scrum stuff again, so we have 2 hours this time around. So what we'll do is I'll give you guys another 30 minutes where I can come around and help you with the problems that you have right now, and then we will get together and do a little design. So you'll go through and show the whole class, and I'll participate too, where you are right now with your code, and we'll give you a little bit of feedback on how to improve it and make things better and help you get where you want to go. And then we'll let you go back to work, and then you'll have us stand up towards the end of class just so you can ask any additional questions that are necessary, and then that'll be it. Next class, at the beginning of class for the first 30, 40 minutes or so, we will have a presentation that'll be pretty similar to what we're going to do today during the design portion, and that way you can get some feedback again on where you're at. Next time after that, we will start working on real JavaScript, which is really, we're going to start from where we were today. We're going to talk about the document object model, we're going to talk about adding event listeners, that type of thing. Questions?
All right, so I'm just going to put like a schedule.
So,
yes, I was saying, I'm just trying to, maybe do 10 off.
so if I want to embed audio right, into each of these albums that I have,
Yep.
Can I just expect that it's like, it's a little frustrating to be at home and think it's not working, you know? Can I just expect it's not gonna work, and then when I get, like, is there a way
So
to?
audio, if you include it as using the audio tag,
Mhm,
as opposed to trying to do it with the YouTube video,
mhm,
it should work.
okay,
So if you have an actual MP3 file that's available locally,
mhm,
and you reference that MP3 file in your
Right.
audio tag, it'll work. The reason why YouTube doesn't work is because they're Google, and I think you're hacking it by going to there from a local.
So is there a way to project this, like my page, onto a server that Google doesn't think I'm having?
I mean, so you just push like you've been doing, and it's there in a minute, or
Right,
there's like.
so I would have to buy a domain.
But can you just look at it on your phone? Because we have a link to our page, the website.
So you can look at it on your phone. Yeah, so you can, if you push your code and it goes on GitLab, you can go to the website that you have available there to look at it. If you want to just continue to develop locally and have Google not complain about it, I don't even know if there is a way. So you could fake it. You could create like a proxy. So you could create an SSL server on your local site. You could create a proxy that looks like a real domain, and then I don't think that's worth it for waiting a minute.
One other question. So one of the things that we had to accomplish in the lab was to make it scalable onto multiple devices.
Yep.
So in my index.html, I added the meta viewport.
Yep.
Is that going to
We
do
are.
it? Is that?
So that will make it so that if you were to actually load it up on a real mobile device, so if you looked at it on your phone, for example, it won't zoom out the whole website.
So I was asking if you
But
updated this.
it doesn't actually make it so
Oh,
that
that's Surge Lab.
So the thing that makes it responsive, that allows it to be
But we're not
look good on multiple
using
device
Surge
sizes, is media queries,
Okay.
because
which is
we
where
bought
you
it
say
from-
at a certain breakpoint. So basically when the screen gets small, like mobile size,
Right.
basically at that point, I potentially want all of my items to be in line,
It's
kind of like you have them right now.
Mhm.
But when I'm at a bigger screen size, maybe, for example, with yours, you have the albums that are stacked on top of each other.
Right.
Maybe at a bigger screen size, you want them horizontal to one another.
Mhm.
But when you get to a smaller screen size, you want them to become vertical.
Okay. And I think I saw that in one of the lessons, but would I do that via HTML or?
So media queries are CSS selectors, and basically what you do with a media query is you define.
HTML.
Uh,
Do it as the page, the entire page.
so
Or the body?
so what a media query does, you define it in CSS outside of all of your other selectors, so it's at the same level as HTML.
Mhm.
And then what you do is you put inside of the media query brackets changes to your CSS selectors. So it would be at media,
Literally that.
yeah, space, screen, space and gradient space, and then in parentheses, min dash width, colon, like 460 maybe pixels, yes. And then open, so go outside of the parentheses, open curly braces. And then inside of here, you would do like, you can change anything that's down here essentially. So at the small screen size, if you wanted the biography color to be blue, you can go here. Inside of here, biography again.
Oh, okay, so
You're changing it out of screen size. That's what you're doing. You're saying, I want my CSS at this screen size to be one thing, where in general it does this other.
got it. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
The syntax might not be right. Also, just look
No,
at
I'll look at it. Cool. No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Charles, what's the schedule? Get that stuff from good. So,
No, it's fine. There we go. All right, so you want to do you have Slack on that computer? Can you log in through the internet? It might be easier for me to just copy these commands for you. Yeah, let me, sorry.
I think this is also an argument for using professional photos because you have to resize it when they're not done with a professional camera. Makes sense.
All right, so
if you can copy that, Charles. The first thing under my name is SSH dash keygen. Grab all that. And then you're terminally going to paste that and then press space. Is it? Maybe it's, I don't know, right click and paste. Yeah. Space. And then put your email address associated with your email. Yep. That's okay. And then just press enter. No. Press this.
Just press it.
Yeah.
Enter.
Enter. Okay. Now we want to type cat space
just press enter. Okay, control C. Okay. Cat space tilde slash / yep dot ssh slash ID underscore RSA dot pub.
PUB.
Okay, copy that. Yep. And then go to GitLab. Click on your profile thing, and then settings. SSH keys over on the left. So
Oh, so you
and then paste it what you did right there. And then add key. Cool. And then if you go back to, so then we want to go to groups and just, yep. And then click on Flatiron. And then click on responsive. And then click the copy button that's up here. So we'll hide it. Okay. And then go back to terminal, git space clone. You want to go somewhere like probably code. Type pwd. Okay. Type ls. So nice. Where did you get this terminal from?
Right here.
Okay. Git. Sweet. That's awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's gonna make future classes a lot better because all these commands are exactly the same as they would be on Linux or on Macs.
Okay.
So like you can keep up when you use it as well. So,
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
you-
I just have instance. Yeah, I just happen to find this.
yeah, no, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So if you go back into the terminal, do you have a code, Birk? So the easiest thing is to just, it's make directory, it's mkdir space code.
Code.
Yep. Okay, and then cd space code. Alright, so then you can do git space clone. Space, sorry, press up. Space, paste the GitLab thing. Right click. Press enter. So what that's doing is it's pulling down the repo from GitLab to your computer. Yes. Should I press it? It's because we created a new SSH key.
So every time you do a new repo, you better do a new SSH key.
No. You only have to do a new SSH key because you change computers.
Okay, gotcha.
So basically, the SSH key stays on your computer, the private version of it. You put the public version on GitLab, and then when your computer connects to GitLab, it references that SSH key and makes sure that they match.
Okay.
So when you got a new computer, you lost your old SSH key,
Gotcha.
and so we had to create a new one so that they would match again.
Okay.
You actually could have taken the one from your old computer and copied the one to here into that same place, and it would have kept working.
Gotcha. Okay.
So now if you do git checkout space dash b dash b space Charles. There's a checkout that has a P before it. If you press up, and if you hold it, I don't actually know how that works. CD, we have to CD end to responsive. So CD space responsive. Yep. And then press L a couple times. Okay, so now you're on your own branch. If we go into your file directory, we can find this. What we want to do is copy. I mean, you can start from scratch, but we need an index.html that has a index.css linked into it. So you probably want to just copy from the learning git. You don't have anything because. Okay, so do this. Do git space clone. And if you go back to GitLab. And then go click on groups again. And then your groups, flat iron. And then click on learning dash git 2. Further down. Yeah. And then click on the back to terminal. Space paste. So now you can actually try to take open space dot. Yep. Okay. If you go to your directory though, it's where you see folders and stuff on your computer. My computer is what it used to be called. Yeah, file explorer. You know what I'm talking about though? Like, there's this, we see that works. So then you go to probably yeah, and then users, and then draw and code. Oh, hold on, we didn't get. Oh, I know what happened. Go back to your terminal. We cloned the learning git repo into your responsive repo. We didn't mean to do that. So if you do mv, which is move, space, learn, tab.
Press tab.
Yep. And then space, dot, slash, learning dash git 2. CD space dot. There, plus. Okay, so now I'm going to go there. So if you go back to the file, so now it's there. Okay, so if you open up learning dash git 2, just want to copy those 3 index files. Back in the code. Just go to the code directory there. We just want to copy them into that other. So we come over there, just paste. Okay, so now if you go back to the terminal, CD into responsive, so CD space responsive. And then get status. Okay, so it shows that you added those 3 files. So you can git add dot git commit dash m and git push.
Okay.
Let's just do that real quick. It'll get you on GitLab.
So you said do
So git space add space dot
space dot.
there and git commit space dash m space quotes initial commit or something. Git push. So we should do that. So do copy git config global user dot email. So you can copy that whole first line, but then you need to replace you at example.com with your email address. Yeah, you have to right click copy. It tells you It says you can press Shift Insert, but I don't know what that. I don't know what insert is. Which would have done these. Oh, it did. So the problem is press up. Change it. T.com. Yeah, you can actually press enter from anywhere.
Okay.
And then we want to do the same thing for your username. Change the username to be, it's like CS. Alright, so now get status. Okay, so things have been stated but not committed. So if you press up a couple times, we'll do that commit again. Okay, and then get push origin Charles. Okay. So what that's done, if you go into the browser, one thing is you have your branch that's on GitLab now. So if you go back to groups, responsive, and branches at the top. Alright, so there's your branch, which will have your changes, etc. The second thing that you can do now is if you open up a new tab, you can go to responsive dot flatiron dc.com/Charles. So it's blank, it's working. There's nothing in the index file, but then your site's up and running.
Cool. And
so now you just open up that folder inside of Atom and you just start building your website.
Okay. And what was I going to ask you? So we're not using Surge at all?
No, I mean you can use Surge, but this I think is going to give you more experience in like real world development because it's actually on your computer and you're doing the stuff with Git and commit and all that.
Okay.
The only advantage that Surge would give you is like the thing that Vishal's running into, where because you're on a local computer as opposed to being on a server while you're developing, like the YouTube videos don't show up.
Okay.
But you can push them. You saw how fast it shows up on the website. So if you just push, it'll show up there. I mean, it probably only takes like 15 seconds. It could take up to a minute, but it's not going to take very long time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Sam.
Yep.
Is there any way to make these two here come to this area without coding every single photo? I'm just not sure why they went down there instead of right here. All of the rows have.
If you make your browser just a little bit wider, like, yeah, or you can even move that a little bit. I don't know. I can look. Did you your code? Can you push your code up?
Yes.
Are these just
Yeah, it's this one.
okay? These are just you playing around or something, I guess.
Yeah, when you click on the pictures, they go there.
Oh, okay. I see. That makes sense.
To not have to do font base. That's my next question.
Yes. So this needs to be a string, and it needs to reference. So in your case, right, we're at index.css, but your font is inside of the fonts folder. So you have to say font slash. Remember the relative pathing stuff? So that's why. So it has to be a string, and it has to have the full path to get there. Okay, and then this. Header expected end. Not sure what that's doing. Generally speaking, stars are problematic because it applies to everything that hasn't explicitly set that attribute that it can. And so it's really hard to like debug when you accidentally, like you added a new thing and you didn't want it to have that box sizing. Now you have to take it off, and it's so it's hard to deal with. So if we remove that, we can put it on the elements that we actually want it to have. So if we, it might not even make any difference whatsoever in here. Like I don't. What is the difference here?
I read it.
Adam, do you ever use a Git panel?
Say that one more time.
Adam, do you ever use the Git panel?
I don't really, but I use something similar in RubyMine.
Okay.
I don't know. Is it just showing like the branch separations, or is it?
I haven't opened it. It just says it's giving me the option of version control. It says with GitHub. So it says open the Git panel, then open the GitHub panel. So I haven't actually touched it yet. So I'm going to just do all that over here.
It's just showing you. Yeah, it's just a GUI for doing the commands that we've been doing.
Okay.
And you can see like your previous command. So that's your initial command right there.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, you could just write a command message here and then click commit to Charles,
Okay.
and that will commit it. It still will not have pushed it. I think if you click the publish button after you commit it, it'll push it.
Oh, okay.
I think it's making all of the boxes the same size.
So let's see.
It says it makes sure that all the elements are sized in a more intuitive way.
Yeah. You said box size and border box on an element padding and border are included in the width and height. Yeah, it's just about, so if you were calculating the height of a particular div without it being border box, the height doesn't necessarily include the padding and the border, so it's fine. It just changes the height essentially. But if we can, we'll just put that on column instead of on everything. I think that'll give us the same outcome. Yeah.
Okay.
Then let's move fronts. Are you only trying to apply the font to the header?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But so in their code, they had the header tag in CSS, and then they had as if it were a header class in their HTML, which I didn't see, and I wasn't sure why both were needed.
Because the one is saying, I have a new font, and this is where to look for it. Like this exists in my project. And the other is saying, I want you to apply this font to this particular selector.
Okay.
What the heck is going on? So what we really want to do is something like that. And then we want to say, is it font family? See, we're just consistent with like what they're doing on W3 schools. And then if I go back and look, that's what you're trying to do, I see.
Okay.
I'll push all this stuff back up so you can pull it down and have it. But all right, so then we would do the same thing for this guy. And well, it's the same one actually, right? So you don't. Well, and in fact, so you see, well, you have header and a class of header. Did you mean to do that?
No, I don't have a class of header, but they
Okay.
had it that way, and I didn't see a class of header in their HTML, so I wasn't sure. It's
Yeah.
on that W3 schools one.
Yeah, there's no class of header, so that's not doing anything. So we can pull it out.
But when I did that, it changed.
Yeah, it should be fine. Then we have a row that has display flex wrap, a little bit of padding. Column also has a little bit of padding.
Oh, you know what? They did have a class of header in theirs. I just didn't put it in.
Yeah, you probably took it out, which is that's fine.
I just wanted to use the tag.
Yeah. Alright. Then there's a column. There's that. Media queries. That looks good. I think you probably want to make these the same so that it does the opposite when it hits exactly that place. Because if you don't do that, then there's going to be like an in-between. So like right now what it says is when I get to 800, just make them 100%. And when I'm less than that, make them 50%.
Okay, because when I was doing it last night, it was going full to 2 columns to 1 column.
Yeah, so and you can do that. It's just that's what's happening when you do this. And that's because there's a point at which you are not setting. Oh, you are. It's just a 25%. I see. But I would have expected. I mean, it seems like. Okay, that might be why it's not flopping. Call it 25%. So, one thing to think about is right now, like you at this level, it's set to 25%. When I reach a certain height, it should go back to 50%. I'd have to inspect it. Maybe it won't. But anyway, like you have this extra space that's left over here. And we could center the whole thing in the middle if you want to have like 2 things on the side.
Yeah.
But the other way to do it is you just don't force the width. And we probably have to, because you probably are setting the width inside of the index of HTML.
Yeah, they're at 100%.
Well, but that's the images. That should be okay. So let's see what happens if they're still. Oh. There we go. See, so now you see?
Yeah.
So by not forcing the width, and in fact on a larger screen it would pull even more up higher. But by not forcing the width, you're able to allow it to sort of correct itself.
Yeah, so I think last night when I put that width at 75, I kind of wanted similar to photo grid, and I wanted there to be space around it.
So I think the best way to do that is, let's see, so we can create padding on the row. Or really margin on the row. And we just want it to be on the left and right. So we'll say 0 and then 10%. So now it'll always keep that extra bit of space there. Work better if you make it smaller. But see, it remains centered because you're putting 10% of padding on each side. But if it gets bigger and bigger, it'll keep expanding correctly. Now, because we did that, we probably want our header to also have a padding.
I also tried to center the header, but it's not doing it.
It's the same thing, I think. Well, so this gets it so that it's actually in line, but you might want it like that. If you want the text to be centered inside of there, and it's just text center. Oh. It's interesting. I would have expected that to work.
In the
Oh, because so you have to center the H1 because the text is actually inside of the H1.
Okay.
So if we do oh, that's not a thing. Text align is a thing. Still didn't do it though. This is the thing about moving stuff. So what's happening is the H1 that you created, that's inside of the header. See when I scroll over it, how it's only that little piece there? It's not taking up the full width of the header. So it is centering the text inside of the H1, but the H1 happens to be a really small thing.
Okay.
So you can do one of two things. You can either make the width of the H1 100%, which will make it just as wide as your header, which is already pretty large, and then you can do text center inside of that. Or you can do margin 0 auto, which will you can do margin 0 auto to the H1 tag, which will say space me equally from both sides.
Okay.
So the easiest thing to do is probably that. So just do. And you got it. Oh, say nice. Something weird happened.
So I was saying, I think part of the issue with the photos is, you know, people always say like they ask you to send photos, like make sure they are a certain size or they're like professional photos and not screenshots. Because when you upload them, they'll start to act weird. I think that's what's going on because some of these are screenshots, and some of them my mom took with her phone. Like this is some of those are different from a digital camera, so.
Yeah, that's all fine. So that doesn't have anything to do with like the spacing that you're creating. What they're talking about is if you have poor quality photos, which these are all high quality photos. If you have poor quality photos, then as they get bigger and smaller, they look bad.
Yeah, that's so. I was adjusting the height on some of them, but then they start to get blurry.
Yes.
So I don't really want to.
That's what happens. That's right. Well, so and the other thing is that'll also happen if you try to size both the width and the height of an image. And the reason is that they are no longer proportional, and so it drags them. But that doesn't have to do with the quality. So the quality is usually about, I'm trying to take what was taken as a very small pixel photo, and I want to make it really big. So these should all, even with digital, so like this right here is probably changing the width and the height. Yeah, see how it's changing both the width and the height? If you just choose one,
So if width 100%,
it won't be blurry.
Because I only did the height.
So you had both width and height on here.
With width being 100%?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what it's doing is it's making sure that the width is 100% and now the height is 275 pixels, but that's not proportional.
Okay.
So if you size only the width or the height of an image, it'll keep it proportional and it won't do the blurriness. Yeah, these photos are all very high quality photos. You shouldn't have to worry about that. It's just about doing the width and the height at the same time. So the problem is, like, we can change it so that we do the height instead of doing the width, but that has its own issues.
Yeah, the other pictures are
Maybe that's just... So why are you doing 2 images in each column?
they're only grouped by their names.
But why not just, I mean, but what effect are you trying to create there?
No, that was just how it was written on W3 schools. They had the columns with like 5 images in each column. So I just did that the same way and just put them the same image, the images with the same name in each column.
I see. So the way that you're doing the Flexbox stuff, though, I don't think, and this might be where your whole problem is. Let's see. This is going to be tricky. So now if we take the explicit height off of the ones that have height, Okay, so I can get you that far. The problem is now that the height of this row is being determined by the height of the biggest picture. And so anything that's smaller is going to leave a gap. So, well, you know what?
So I think.
So one way to do it is we could change the height of all of these to be something like oh. And then do you have some width on their index? Let's not do that. And then alright. So yeah, so now
So the thing was that all the pictures are supposed to.
stagger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and they are still, but they're doing it now the width-wise, which allows it to like fall off the edge. But yeah, if you want that effect that you had before, your two options are you can try to move to flex, or not flex, you can try to move to using a float, or you can try to resize the individual images like this one to be something that's going to work for you. Or you can go to grid. Those are really the options that are available with this. You could also now I was going to say, like, you see you have this image and you have this image and they almost make a full image. You could
Order them that way.
yeah. Or you could explicitly put all of these in a column, but then they won't just auto wrap the way that I was doing. So they would wrap between, they would go, so like for example, you could create 4 columns and then put all of your pictures in those 4 columns, so split them up by 4. And then what'll happen is on a large screen, it'll look nice, like all 4 and they'll be staggered and all of that. And on a small screen, they'll wrap down so that they're all on top of each other. You just won't get the 2x2 option.
Okay.
So you can,
So when we're looking at the code from W3 schools, I think you saw it earlier.
yep.
Do you know, like, why they would have grouped the images that way?
Yeah, it's because they're trying to do this. This is what I'm suggesting. So, how many images do you have? Do you know?
I think 20. Yeah, it's 20.
So we make 7 columns with the images.
Yeah.
They have 4 columns in there. Okay, I understand.
Yeah. So that'll keep them so that they sit just on top of each other within the column.
Yeah.
And then what you have is like 4 full columns with divs straight on top of each other. And then you won't have the breaking. But it does mean you can't move to 2 columns. Like, you know, you're just stuck with 4 or 1. But that's fine. I mean, that's a pretty typical design pattern.
They did a 2-column in their response with the
So you see, you may want to move. You may want to like switch this image and this image or something so that it at the bottom they're closer together. See what I'm saying? Like switch a big photo for a small photo so that they end up lining up closer together at the bottom. But that's it. So this is great. And when it gets down small enough, actually did it with the 2. Actually, that works great because even with the 2, it's still saying, hey, these 2, we have 4 columns. I can only hold on to 2 columns right now. Swap down, move those other 2 columns underneath of the first 2 columns. We may end up with a gap, yep, right here. So there's a little gap between those 2 columns in that case. But that's it. And then.
So what did you write to make it scale down like
It's a really query.
Well, it's actually not. I don't think your media queries actually end up doing much.
Yeah, there's a 2-column one in there.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure if we. Not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure if we just get rid of it, it still does the same thing. Okay, so that's where. So the sizing, because right now they're set to flex 25%. Yep, that's the problem. Okay, so it does. So because the width is changing as it gets smaller, it's going to cause it to get the number of pictures having that width in a row are going to become too big for the row itself, and that causes, because of the flex wrap here, it causes those columns to drop down. So when we get to that size, you see how the images, each image actually got larger because we hit the media breakpoint. That causes it to be too wide with these 2 images to have 2 more images next to it, and that causes those columns to drop underneath because of the flex wrap. And then when it gets even smaller, the images, because again, the way that you wrote the media queries, it causes the image to get bigger, and so it causes the other ones to drop.
So
Mischievous.
Basic question is.
She's 13 now.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you bring mine up?
Yep. Yep.
So when we started class, I was messing around a little bit, and something happened where my album images started to go up.
Okay. Have you pushed your code?
No.
If you push it, I can pull it and actually work on it. Yeah, as long as you haven't made any changes since I did that. So let's just make sure you're in good state, so take good status. Okay, so just git pull. You should be able to just do git pull and should pull like everything, including what you're currently. You don't, so you just want to git pull. Okay. Or git pull origin Chicago, because you just want to pull your branch. I just made changes on your branch.
Okay.
Yep.
So git add dot, git push, and then git push origin master v, which is my branch. Right?
Git add dot, git commit dash m.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah. That's it. So you can see the changes that I made up there if you look at that.
it should be good.
Cool.
Yes, this one is 13 now, and she doesn't talk.
No. She'll talk again. All right, so now we switched over to your stuff.
Yep, so I had them vertically aligned before. I don't oppose the way it looks right now, but I'm just curious as to why they became the way they did. It was vertical, right? We saw
Yep. So you don't know why these two got next to each other?
Right.
Let's see.
So I put alts on these images, and it's not, when I hover, it doesn't.
You have to do title to get it. You're thinking of title.
Oh.
Alt is if there was a screen reader, so a person with a
Okay.
disability, it will read to them whatever is in the alt tag, but you'll never know anything about it. Yeah, so in this thing, I'm just going to try this real quick, Vishal. I just want to see what happens if we do. Whoa, what? Hold on, what do you think I did? Oh, maybe. Huh. Oh. So I've broken everything, but so you just had padding 100, which I don't know, maybe that's padding left. I think maybe these weren't doing anything before. Just gonna remove them. Yeah, there we go. So you had a couple of paddings that just, so you said padding colon 100 and padding colon 500. I don't think those were actually doing anything because they were invalid CSS. So you have to put 100 PX or 100% or something like that. And so when I put PX on them, it caused it to actually do what it's supposed to do, and that made your site look weird. So I think that's fixed now. Let me try. Should be able to do RGB.
So you recommend I remove the padding or add the PX to it?
Remove it. If you add the PX, it'll make it do it. Did you see what happened when I added it? It causes it to look weird. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so this is only on the 1/2. I don't know. So you had the yellow gradient piece. I don't know if you were really trying to get it to do something more like this. I can put it back to the yellow. I was just trying to show you like that. This is how you get it to. So maybe it's.
I was more concerned with. I was just wondering why the picture showed up.
Yeah, and I can do that too. I just happened to notice this while we were going through, because you can do the linear. The way it was, sure.
The way it was, yeah.
I can put it back. It's just when we talked about it earlier. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Cool. And then let's see.
So the Ruby line, you get put when you insert an image, it doesn't show the whole string.
It's just because you're doing. Yeah. So you're including a base 64 encoded image. Normally you would just put a link. Like you would just either have the actual image somewhere inside of your directory. So like you might have a directory called images and then just link to that instead of putting the whole base 64 encoded thing in there.
And so if I did that on my computer, it would globally do it as well? Like it wouldn't be an issue?
Yeah, because what will happen is, so here I can show you real quick. Let's see if I take, what I have a screenshot somewhere. So I can take the screenshot and I can go into responsive. I'm just going to create a new folder in here called images. And then I'm going to put that screenshot in there. I'll just rename it something that's easier to. So I'll name it screen.ping. So then I can create an image that has a source of images slash screen.ping. Because you can see it's all the same, right? It's right there. Okay, so then if I refresh, it's here. Right. And then when I push it, it'll push the image along with the rest of your code up to GitHub, which will then sync onto S3 and it'll show up on the website.
Okay, so is that a best practice, like to save it and then create?
Yeah, typically, unless you're trying to like dynamically load in images that somebody else has uploaded and it's somewhere else that exists on the internet. But yeah, this is usually like if you're creating a static site like this, that's the way to do it. So I'll leave that like that, and then you can just delete it or whatever. But you have an example. Okay, so let's see what's actually going on. Let me just. So that'll comment it out for a moment so we can go back to looking at your site the way it's supposed to. And then, alright, so you have divs. It's inside the top element. Just as a heads up,
Yeah.
A couple of things. As a convention, your IDs and class names are generally lowercase. IDs are usually separating words is done with an underscore. Classes, the names are separated with a dash, a hyphen. So like in this case, they also have to be strings. Yep. They also have to be strings. So like you have most of them right, but navbar was missing the string. So yeah, it would be like this, and then yeah, like top albums is done, but you would do it like this. I'll put it back. You don't have to do that. It's just that's normally what.
Okay. So we also want to do Flex container though. When I was looking at W3 schools, was written that way.
I don't think. I mean, I want to believe you. It just sounds unlikely. But yeah, again, you can do it. So I wouldn't be super surprised if that was the case.
Right.
It's just by convention, it's usually not. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so like flex container, like that. That's normally how you'd name a class. So like top albums in this case would normally be with a hyphen like that. Yeah. Yep.
So would the live performances then be a hyphen?
Live performances would also be a hyphen. Yep. But IDs, so like navbar, if it was, yeah, if you were doing nav underscore bar, it would be, yeah, like that. Okay. Cool. So then, let's see. So you're inside of this div. You have a flex container. Okay. So you did put them inside of a flex container. You probably don't want your H2 inside of the flex container because
that's what I was messing around with, and that's when things got weird. I tried dropping the flex container down.
Yep.
And then it got super weird, and then I brought it back up, and it never came back to how I wanted it.
Yeah, so let's go back and first look. So flex container isn't actually doing anything right now.
Okay.
It's like, so if you want them to be on top of each other, one way to do that is to say display flex and then flex direction. It's going to be column.
Okay.
And that'll actually look like it works correctly here. Let me see. Where'd my site go? This one? Oh. There it is. Okay, so it keeps those on top of each other, but what you really probably want to do is have top albums be its own thing.
Mhm.
And then you want to have a flex container that is going to, because what flex container is going to do is affect all of its immediately nested elements.
Mhm.
So when you have this H2 inside of here, that's included. So like if you created a row, if you did flex direction row, the H2 would go next to the div, which would go next to this div, which would go next to this div, which would go next to this div. So generally speaking, you just want H2 to be on top of all the rest of this stuff. So you probably don't want to flex it. You probably just want it to be outside. Then we have a div. The problem here is you're opening the div, but you don't close the div. Like it looks like you close the div, but you don't because you have to have the backslash. And then on this one, you want to open the div, and then close the div, and then open the div, and then close the div, and then open, and then close. And so then they're back on top.
The top albums, okay, so we just center.
So then you probably want to center the top album. So you,
CSS, cool.
yep, you can do CSS, etc. Yep.
Cool. Can you
Yep.
push that?
Yep. The other.
What's the correct way to say it? Would you?
Yeah, push. Yeah, can you push that? The other thing, just really quickly, as a demonstration, if we change this from flex column to row, it's gonna like push these things next to each other. So anyway, that's just how you can start to play with things. It's causing everything in flex container to stack on top of each other, which honestly by default is what they would do anyways, divs. So it's not doing all that much, but anyway. All right, so I'm gonna push this. All right, quick Git thing because there's an interesting thing happening right now. You see how I did Git status and there's this .ds_store in there. That is that's a thing that Macs create whenever you make changes to a directory. We don't care about pushing that up to GitLab. It's just like a silly thing that's just going to confuse us. So if things like that happen, like there's files on your computer that you want to keep on your computer, but you don't want to ever push them up, the way to do that is you create what's called a gitignore file. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it .gitignore. And then inside of there, you can explicitly name any files that you don't ever want to commit or push. So I don't understand what's going on with this thing. Well, I've killed my entire computer. Hold on. Alright, so I can do .ds_store. And now when I come back here, I can do git status. And you see that .ds_store is no longer there. It's completely untracked. It'll stay on my computer, but it'll never get committed or pushed. But the .gitignore file is something that I'll add and commit and push, so then that way your .ds_store will never get pushed. So.
And what value does that have to you as a user?
So what, the ds_store or the gitignore stuff?
The gitignore.
So the gitignore, the reason why it's valuable is one example is package management. So generally speaking, you will ship your code with a package.json file, which defines all the packages that you're including, so libraries that other third parties have created that you're using. And you don't want to push and pull that to your repo every time for a couple of reasons. One is those packages get updated and people should be keeping them up to date. The second is that it's a lot of payload. So like you're pushing a whole lot of stuff up to your site and bringing it down every time, and you probably don't need to do that. So you frequently will ignore the folder where all of those libraries live. So you have a local copy of those things, but when you push to GitHub, they don't have it. What they do to get the packages is they can do an npm install, it's called, which will look at that package.json file for whatever libraries you should be including, and it'll download all of them. The second use case is for things like this, where it's like I use a Mac and Charles uses a PC. He doesn't even have a DS store. Or I have a Mac and you have a Mac and we both have a DS store. If we both push the DS store, we're going to get conflicts all the time. And it has nothing to do with our code. We don't want to have conflicts about the DS store, which has to do with like our local MacBooks doing of things, right? And so that's the reason why you ignore things. Yep.
So can I get full? Did you?
One sec.
Very good.
Okay, now you can pull.
So I have to make a CSS file for all of these pages.
No. Well,
Thank you.
yep. So,
I'm feeling regrets. I want them all to be styled the same way.
Okay. So the easiest way to do that is on each one of those you include
Just import the one style.
Yeah.
Style sheet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you do have to import it on all of them.
Okay.
In most modern websites, you wouldn't have to worry about that because with a single app, what ends up happening is you would build your little components, like each one of your images, and what happens is through JavaScript, like you saw that I changed the HTML out, you can change the HTML out to be the whole file of HTML that you're creating. So then you're just changing out the body, and so you still have all your styles. You just have to bring the styles in one time. I can try. There's not a super easy way for me to demonstrate that at this moment, but hopefully that'll become more clear as we go through the JavaScript stuff.
Okay. So I'm just gonna make.
Whoa.
What happened?
I do not have my HTML anymore. I have my CSS. I do not have my HTML.
Hold on. So I still have your HTML, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be on GitLab, which would probably mean. So Adam's weird about pulling. Yeah, it's up there. So Adam's weird about pulling sometimes. I think so.
Is that
Oh, where did you pull? When you did get pulled, what did you actually type?
did my version master be?
So no.
Cool.
So the problem is you see that's
What's that push?
well we did pull.
Get pulled the break, or you do master.
You shouldn't do master though. It should be
Just get
type
forward.
status. So let's try to get you back into a good state. So if you do git checkout dash b space trash, b space trash, and then your git status. What we're going to do is add and commit things onto this branch.
Okay.
So that there's no way to get back on the old branch. And then we're going to delete your old branch locally, and then we're going to fetch the good branch from GitLab.
Okay.
So the way to do that is go ahead and git add dot, and then git commit dash m is trash. Yeah, no, that was fine.
Okay.
Trash is just the message.
Okay.
And then git branch space v space dash capital D. And I'll delete your branch and then do git fetch. And then do git checkout V. Actually, do git branch. Do git checkout V. Cool. Now if you go back to your stuff and Adam.
close this. So see, this is where it's happening. You see how you didn't make a change to index.html, but it says that you need to save. Exit out of that.
Yeah.
Say don't save. And now redo. There you go. It's just add-on for some reason. When it's doing the switching, sometimes it thinks that it should save the bad state instead of just switching over for you.
Okay.
So sometimes you just have to close and not save data.
So you use RubyMine, you said?
I use RubyMine.
Do you recommend using that instead of Atom?
Yeah, it's just that it costs $80 a year. So it's
year?
like, yeah. So it's like, and if you're going to do that, you should get, let me see, what's it called? So IntelliJ makes RubyMine. They also make a bunch of other IDEs. RubyMine is really for Ruby. It also has a lot of the JavaScript stuff, so I use it for that as well, so that I don't have to buy both of these things. But they make one specifically for JavaScript, which is called WebStorm.
Okay.
So WebStorm is just like RubyMine, except that it's purely for JavaScript, and you can buy it. If you're a student, you can get it for free, I think, even. Yeah, so there's, make sure that you go to individual customers. Okay, so it's $60 a year.
Yeah.
And then it goes down from that point on to the second time's 47 and then 35. Yeah, I mean, that might very well be worth the investment.
Yeah. The one problem is they don't give us a .edu web address going to school.
I know.
I was trying to switch my Amazon, save $60 a year,
Yeah,
but I don't have
.edu, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. At a minimum, there's a free trial of these things that'll last for like 2 weeks, I think. So
Okay.
if you wanted to try it out, you can just download the trial. The other thing to potentially try is Sublime. Sublime does a better job with that. It's just, and Sublime is technically free. I think he asked for like $35 as a donation, and you will every once in a while when you save a file, it'll give you a message that says, "Hey, I do this for a living. Can you please give me a little money?" But you don't have to ever pay.
Okay.
You can just deal with the pop-up and just always say no. Yeah, I'm trying to find. Oh, now who wants $80? It's been a few years. So yeah, in that case, definitely go WebStorm, not Sublime. And I'm sorry, because there's a whole bunch of stuff, like we completely blew past stuff, but I think we kind of got to do both of your designs. Charles, I know you're a little behind here, but do you want to talk about what your plans are, what you're trying, like what you're thinking in terms of what you want to build?
Maybe like a portfolio site.
Okay, for yourself or?
Yeah, for myself.
Okay. You have an idea about like how you want the site to be structured? Like, are you going to try to do like 3 columns next to each other, or?
So.
Okay. All right. So one thing, Charles, I told him last time, there's no plagiarism here. Like if you want to go to, you can look on GitLab at the other branches, and if another student is doing something that you like, take it and modify it with your own content. Like there's no problem with that. That we're doing this all open source, and generally you would just go search the internet for somebody who's doing the thing you're doing, and that's totally fine too. Go search the internet, find somebody else's code who has a layout that you like, and then just modify it from there. You don't necessarily have to start from scratch.
You said we're presenting